All right. Chapter 8. Morality undermined by sexual notions of the importance of a good reputation. Let me grab my highlighter. Sorry. It has long since occurred to me that advice respecting behavior and all the various modes of preserving a good reputation, which have been so strenuously inculcated on the female world, were specious poisons that, encrusting morality, eat away the substance. And that this measure of shadows produced a false calculation, because their length depends so much on the height of the sun and other adventitious circumstances. Whence arises the easy fallacious behavior of a courtier? From his situation, undoubtedly. For standing in need of dependence, he is obliged to learn the art of denying without giving offense, and of evasively feeding hope with the chameleon's food. Okay. It's a bit above my head. I don't know. What is a courtier exactly? Let me look that up. Somebody in the court. What a dummy. Courtier. Person who attends royal court as a companion or advisor of the king or queen. Pretty smart guy, I guess. Thus does politeness sport with truth, and eating away the sincerity and humanity natural to man, produce the fine gentleman. Women likewise acquire, from a supposed necessity, an equally artificial mode of behavior. Yet truth is not with impunity to be sported with, for the practiced dissembler, at last, become the dupe of his own arts, loses the sagacity which has been justly termed common sense, namely, a quick perception of common truths, which are constantly received as such by the unsophisticated mind, though it might not have had sufficient energy to discover them itself, when obscured by local prejudices. The greater number of people take their opinions on trust to avoid the trouble of exercising their own minds, and these indolent beings naturally adhere to the letter rather than the spirit of a law, divine or human. Something lawyers like to say, letter rather than spirit, or spirit rather than letter. I mean, depends on what you're arguing. Women, says some author, I cannot recollect who, mind not what only heaven sees. Okay. Why indeed should they? It is the eye of man that they have been taught to dread. And if they can lull their Argus to sleep, they seldom think of heavens or themselves, because their reputation is safe. And it is reputation, not chastity, and all its fair train, that they are employed to keep free from spot, not as a virtue, but to preserve their station in the world. To prove the truth of this remark, I need only advert to the intrigues of married women, particularly in high life, and in countries where women are suitably married, according to their respective ranks, by their parents. If an innocent girl become a prey to love, she is degraded forever, though her mind was not polluted by the arts which married women, under the convenient cloak of marriage, practice. Nor has she violated any duty, but the duty of respecting herself. The married woman, on the contrary, breaks a most sacred engagement, and becomes a cruel mother when she is a false and faithless wife. If her husband have still an affection for her, the arts which she must practice to deceive him will render her the most contemptible of human beings, and at any rate, the contrivances necessary to preserve appearances will keep her mind in that childish or vicious tumult, which destroys all its energy. Besides, in time, like those people who habitually take cordials to raise their spirits, She will want an intrigue to give life to her thoughts, having lost all relish for pleasures that are not highly seasoned by hope or fear. Sometimes married women act still more audaciously. I will mention an instance. Oh no. A woman of quality, notorious for her gallantries, though as she still lived with her husband, nobody chose to place her in the class where she ought to have been placed, made a point of treating with the most insulting contempt a poor, timid creature, abashed by a sense of her former weakness, whom a neighboring gentleman had seduced and afterwards married. This woman had actually confounded virtue with reputation, and I do believe valued herself on the propriety of her behavior before marriage, though when once settled to the satisfaction of her family, she and her lord were equally faithless. Oh my. So that the half-alive heir to an immense estate came from heaven knows where. I thought she was going to make the point that, like, when a woman cheats, it's, like, the worst thing in the world. and she's, whatever. And when a man cheats, it's just like, he's a bit of a dick. You're like, well, okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's brushed off very easily. Maybe she's still going to go there, but I have known a number of women who, if they did not love their husbands, loved nobody else, give themselves entirely up to vanity and dissipation, neglecting every domestic duty, nay, even squandering all the money which should have been saved for their helpless younger children, yet have plumed themselves on their unsullied reputation as if the whole compass of their duty as wives and mothers was only to preserve it. Okay, I kind of see what she's getting at. Like, even if a woman is, completely miserable and there could be things which bring her joy, she's, expected to, maintain a reputation above all else, even if, some things could be found that bring her joy in life. Whilst other indolent women, neglecting every personal duty, have thought that they deserved their husband's affection because, forsooth, they acted in this respect with propriety. Weak minds are always fond of resting in the ceremonials of duty, but morality offers much simpler motives, and it were to be wished that superficial moralists have said less respecting behavior and outward observances, for unless virtue of any kind be built on knowledge, it will only produce a kind of insipid decency. Okay. Respect for the opinion of the world has, however, been termed the principal duty of woman. Respect for the opinion of the world has, however, been termed the principal duty of woman, in the most express words, for Rousseau declares that reputation is no less indispensable than chastity. A man, adds he, secure in his own good conduct, depends only on himself, and may brave the public opinion, but a woman, in behaving well, performs but half her duty, as what is thought of her is as important to her as what really is. As what is thought of her is important to her as what really is. Okay. It follows hence that the system of a woman's education should, in this respect, be directly contrary to that of ours. Opinion is the grave of virtue among the men, but is the throne among women. Okay, yeah. It is strictly logical to infer that the virtue that rests on opinion is merely worldly, and that it is the virtue of a being to whom reason has been denied. But even with respect to the opinion of the world, I am convinced that this class of prisoners are reasoners are mistaken, not prisoners. This regard for reputation, independent of its being one of the natural rewards of virtue, however, took its rise from a cause that I have already deplored as the grand source of female depravity, the impossibility of regaining respectability by a return to virtue, though men preserve theirs during the indulgence of vice. Yeah, so women can return to being virtuous, but their reputation is forever gone. But men can even, preserve theirs, even if they're still being dicks. It was natural for women, then, to endeavor to preserve what once lost was lost forever, till this care swallowing up every other care, reputation for chastity, became the one thing needful to the sex. But vain is the scrupulosity of ignorance. For neither religion nor virtue, when they reside in the heart, requires such a puerile attention to mere ceremonies, because the behavior must, upon the whole, be proper, when the motive is pure. To support my opinion, I can produce very respectable authority, and the authority of a cool reasoner ought to have weight to enforce consideration, though not to establish a sentiment. Speaking of the general laws of morality, Dr. Smith observes that by some very extraordinary and unlucky circumstance, a good man may come to be suspected of a crime of which he was altogether incapable. Upon that account, be most unjustly exposed for the remaining part of his life to the horror and aversion of mankind. By an accident of this kind, he may be said to lose his all, notwithstanding his integrity and justice, in the same manner as a cautious man, notwithstanding his utmost circumspection, may be ruined by an earthquake or an inundation. Accidents of the first kind, however, are perhaps still more rare, and still more contrary to the common course of things than those of the second. And it still remains true that the practice of truth, justice, and humanity is a certain and almost infallible method of acquiring what those virtues chiefly aim at, the confidence and love of those we live with. A person may be easily misrepresented with regard to a particular action, but it is scarce possible that he should be so with regard to the general tenor of his conduct. An innocent man may be believed to have done wrong. This, however, will rarely happen. On the contrary, the established opinion of the innocence of his manners will often lead us to absolve him where he really has been at fault, notwithstanding very strong presumptions. I perfectly coincide with in opinion with this writer, for I verily believe that few of either sex were ever despised for certain vices without deserving to be despised. I speak not of the calumny of the moment, which hovers over a character, like one of the dense morning fogs of November, over this metropolis, till it gradually subsides before the common light of day. I only contend that the daily conduct of the majority prevails to stamp their character with the impression of truth. Quietly does the clear light, shining day after day, refute the ignorant surmise or malicious tale, which has thrown dirt on a pure character. A false light distorted, for a short time, its shadow reputation. But it seldom fails to become just, when the cloud is dispersed that produced the mistake in vision. Many people undoubtedly, in several respects, obtain a better reputation than, strictly speaking, they deserve. For unremitting industry will mostly reach its goal in all races. They who only strive for this paltry prize, like the Pharisees, who prayed at the corner of streets, to the scene of men, verily obtain the reward they seek. For the heart of man cannot be read by man. Still, the fair fame that is naturally reflected by good actions, when the man is only employed to direct his steps aright, regardless of the lookers-on, is, in general, not only more true, but more sure. There are, it is true, trials when the good man must appeal to God from the injustice of man, and amidst the whining candor or hissings of envy, erect a pavilion in his own mind to retire to till the rumor be overpast. Nay, the darts of undeserved censure may pierce an innocent tender bosom through with many sorrows, but these are all exceptions to general rules, and it is, according to common laws, that human behavior ought to be regulated. The eccentric orbit of the comet never influences astronomical calculations, respecting the invariable order established on the motion of the principal bodies of the solar system. I will then venture to affirm that after a man is arrived at maturity, the general outline of his character in the world is just, allowing for the before-mentioned exceptions to the rule. I do not say that a prudent, worldly wise man, with only negative virtues and qualities, may not sometimes obtain a smoother reputation than a wiser or a better man. So far from it, that I am apt to conclude that experience, that where the virtue of two people is nearly equal, the most negative character will be liked best by the world at large, whilst the other may have more friends in private life. Okay? But the hills and dales, clouds and sunshine, conspicuous in the virtues of great men, set off each other. And though they afford envious weakness at a fairer mark to shoot at, the real character will still work its way to light, though bespattered by weak affection or ingenious malice. But the hills and dales, clouds and sunshine, conspicuous in the virtues of great men, set off each other. And though they afford envious weakness a fairer mark to shoot at, the real character will still work its way to light, though bespattered by weak affection or ingenious malice. With respect to that anxiety to preserve a reputation hardly earned, which leads sagacious people to analyze it, I shall not make the obvious comment, but I am afraid that morality is very insidiously undermined in the female world by the attention being turned to the shoe instead of the substance. Shoe, S-H-E-W. By the attention being turned, to the shoe instead of the substance. A simple thing. What is a shoe? I don't know. I'm just going to gloss over it, but okay, let's see. S-H-E-W meaning. Old-fashioned spelling of show. Ooh. Definition of shoe, verb. Establish the validity of something as by example, explanation, or experiment. That seems a little closer to the mark. So what was that? What was that sentence? Shoe and the thing. What the hell is that? I'm just gonna start this paragraph. I don't see it. There it is. Okay. With respect to that anxiety to preserve a reputation hardly earned, which leads sagacious people to analyze it, I shall not make the obvious comment, but I am afraid that morality is very insidiously undermined, in the female world, by the attention being turned to the shoe, validity of something, example, explanation, instead of the substance. Could be the show, too. Show probably makes more sense, actually. The show of being a, good person, moral, instead of the actual substance of whether you are moral. A simple thing is thus made strangely complicated. Nay, sometimes virtue and its shadow are set at variance. We should never, perhaps, have heard of Lucretia. Had she died to preserve her chastity, instead of her reputation. If we really deserve our own good opinion, we shall commonly be respected in the world. But if we pant after higher improvement and higher attainments, it is not sufficient to view ourselves as we suppose that we are viewed by others, though this has been ingeniously argued as the foundation of our moral sentiments. Sorry, say that again. If we really deserve our own good opinion, we shall commonly be respected in the world. Makes sense. But if we pant after higher improvement and higher attainments, it is not sufficient to view ourselves as we suppose that we are viewed by others, right? Though this has been ingeniously argued as the foundation of our moral sentiments. Because each bystander may have his own prejudices, beside the prejudices of his age or country. We should rather endeavor to view ourselves as we suppose that being views us, who seeth each thought ripen into action, and whose judgment never swerves from the eternal rule of right. Righteous are all his judgments, just as merciful. Okay. I don't know. Wouldn't you look at religion a little bit and be like, this is kind of patriarchal too? They kind of talk about this stuff a lot. The humble mind that seeketh to find favor in his sight, and calmly examines its conduct when only his presence is felt, God, it's capital H for his, will seldom form a very erroneous opinion of its own virtues. During the still hour of self-collection, the angry brow of offended justice will be fearfully deprecated, or the tie which draws man to the deity will be recognized in the pure sentiment of reverential adoration that swells the heart without exciting any tumultuous emotions. In these solemn moments, man discovers the germ of those vices which, like the Java tree, shed a pestiferous vapor around. Death is in the shade, and he perceives them without abhorrence, because he feels himself drawn by some cord of love to all his fellow creatures, for whose follies he is anxious to find the very extenuation in their nature in himself. If I, he may thus argue, who exercise my own mind, and have been refined by tribulation, find the serpent's egg in some fold of my heart, and crush it with difficulty, shall not I pity those who have stamped with less vigor, or who have heedlessly nurtured the insidious reptile till it poisoned the vital stream it sucked? Can I, conscious of my secret sins, throw off my fellow creatures, and calmly see them drop into the chasm of perdition that yawns to receive them? No, no. The agonized heart will cry with suffocating impatience. I too am a man, and have vices, hid perhaps from human eye, that bend me to the dust before God, and loudly tell me, when all is mute, that we are formed of the same earth, and breathe the same element. Humanity thus rises naturally out of humility, and twists the cords of love that in various convolutions entangle the heart. She's such a good writer. This sympathy extends still further, till a man, well pleased, observes force in arguments that do not carry conviction to his own bosom, and he gladly places in the fairest light to himself the shoes of reason that have led others astray, rejoiced to find some reason in all the errors of man. Though before convinced that he who rules the day makes his sun to shine on all. Yet, shaking hands thus as it were with corruption, one foot on earth, the other with bold stride mounts to heaven, and claims kindred with superior natures. Virtues unobserved by man drop their balmy fragrance at this cool hour, and the very thirsty land, refreshed by the pure streams of comfort that suddenly gush out, is crowned with smiling verdure. This is the living green on which that eye may look with complacency that is too pure to behold iniquity. But my spirits flag, and I must silently indulge the reverie these reflections lead to, unable to describe the sentiments that have calmed my soul when watching the rising sun. A soft shower drizzling through the leaves of neighboring trees seemed to fall on my languid yet tranquil spirits, to cool the heart that had been heated by the passions which reason labored to tame. The leading principles which run through all my disquisitions would render it unnecessary to enlarge on this subject, if a constant attention to keep the varnish of the character fresh and in good condition were not often inculcated as the sum total of female duty. If rules to regulate the behavior and to preserve the reputation did not too frequently supersede moral obligations. But with respect to reputation, the attention is confined to a single virtue: chastity. If the honor of a woman, as it is absurdly called, be safe, she may neglect every social duty, nay, ruin her family by gaming and extravagance, yet still present a shameless front, for truly she is an honorable woman. Miss Macaulay, has justly observed that there is but one fault which a woman of honor may not commit with impunity. She then justly and humanely adds, this has given rise to the trite and foolish observation that the first fault against chastity in woman has a radical power to deprave the character. But no such frail beings come out of the hands of nature. The human mind is built of nobler materials than to be easily corrupted. And with all their disadvantages of situation and education, women seldom become entirely abandoned till they are thrown into a state of desperation by the venomous rancor of their own sex. Sorry, having some coffee. It's 9:48 p.m. Trying to stay awake. But in proportion as this regard for the reputation of chastity is prized by women, it is despised by men. And the two extremes are equally destructive to morality. Men are certainly more under the influence of their appetites than women, and their appetites are more depraved by unbridled indulgence and the fastidious contrivances of satiety. Luxury has introduced a refinement in eating that destroys the constitution, and a degree of gluttony which is so beastly that a perception of seemliness of behavior must be worn out before one being could eat immoderately in the presence of another, and afterwards complain of the oppression that his intemperance naturally produced. Some women, particularly French women, have also lost a sense of decency in this respect. Is Wollstonecraft, she's English, right? I thought she was English, but there's a sneaking thing in the back of my head that's like, is she French? I don't think she's French. I think she's English. Let me look it up really quick. She's got to be English, right? Mary Woll. Yeah, London. English writer and philosopher. Until the late 20th century, Wollstonecraft's life, which encompassed several unconventional, at the time, personal relationships, received more attention than her writings. She's regarded as one of the founding feminist philosophers. What are these unconventional relationships? Okay, I don't care. She had a friend. Okay. That was a peasant. Okay, where were we? There's no chance I can find it. Oh, French women. Some women, particularly French women, have also lost the sense of decency in this respect, for they will talk very calmly of an indigestion. Oh my. It were to be wished that idleness was not allowed to generate, on the rank soil of wealth, those swarms of summer insects that feed on putrefaction. We should not then be disgusted by the sight of such brutal excesses. Wait, hold on, what? They talk very calmly. It were to be wished that idleness was not allowed to generate, on the rank soil of wealth, those swarms of insects that feed on putrefaction. We should not then be disgusted by the sight of such brutal excesses. Jesus. There is one rule relative to behavior that, I think, ought to regulate every other. Okay, well, lay it on me. What do you got? And it is simply to cherish such an habitual respect for mankind as to prevent us from disgusting a fellow creature for the sake of present indulgence. The shameful indolence of many married women and others a little advanced in life frequently leads them to sin against delicacy. Oh, good. For though convinced that the person is the band of union between the sexes, yet how often do they, from sheer indolence, or to enjoy some trifling indulgence, disgust? The depravity of the appetite which brings the sexes together has had a still more fatal effect. Nature must be the standard of taste, the gauge of appetite, yet how grossly is nature insulted by the voluptuary. Leaving the refinements of love out of the question, nature, by making the gratification of an appetite in this respect, as well as every other, a natural and imperious law to preserve the species, exalts the appetite, and mixes a little mind and affection with a sensual gust, the feelings of a parent mingling with an instinct merely animal. Give it dignity. The feelings of a parent mingling with an instinct merely animal, give it dignity. And the man and woman often meeting on account of the child, a mutual interest and affection is excited by the exercise of a common sympathy. Women then have necessarily some duty to fulfill, more noble than to adorn their persons, would not contentedly be the slaves of casual lust, which is now the situation of a very considerable number who are, literally speaking, standing dishes to which every glutton may have access. Okay. I may be told that great as this enormity is, it only affects a devoted part of the sex, devoted for the salvation of the rest. But false as every assertion might easily be proved, that recommends the sanctioning a small evil to produce a greater good. The mischief does not stop here. Slippery slope. For the moral character and peace of mind of the chaster part of the sex is undermined by the conduct of the very women to whom they allow no refuge from guilt, whom they inexorably consign to the exercise of arts, and lure their husbands from them, debauch their sons, and force them. Let not modest women start to assume, in some degree, the same character themselves, for I will venture to assert that all the causes of female weakness, as well as depravity, which I have already enlarged on, branch out of one grand cause, want of chastity in men. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. There might be a little bit of an oversimplification, but it's probably, especially back then, an issue. This intemperance, so prevalent, depraves the appetite to such a degree that a wanton stimulus is necessary to rouse it. But the parental design of nature is forgotten, and the mere person, and that for a moment alone engrosses the thoughts. So voluptuous indeed often grows the lustful prowler, that he refines on female softness. Something more soft than woman is then sought for, till, in Italy and Portugal, men attend the levees of equivocal beings to sigh for more than female languor. Hold on, there's a footnote. Well, the footnote's just an asterisk. I don't understand how this works. But then there's numbered footnotes, or endnotes in the back. Fuck it. It's fine. To satisfy this genus of men, women are made systematically voluptuous, and though they may not all carry their libertinism to the same height, yet this heartless intercourse with the sex, which they allow themselves, depraves both sexes, because the taste of men is vitiated, and women of all classes naturally square their behavior to gratify the taste by which they obtain pleasure and power. Women becoming, consequently, weaker in mind and body than they ought to be, were one of the grand ends of their being taken into the account, that of bearing and nursing children, have not sufficient strength to discharge the first duty of a mother. What? In sacrificing to lasciviousness the parental affection that ennobles instinct, either destroys the embryo in the womb, or cast it off when born. So what? The women that have sex can't be mothers? Well, I don't understand this, really. I guess it's a woman that would put her physical pleasure ahead of morals. Can't be. I don't know. Nature in everything demands respect, and those who violate her laws. How? Okay. This is from a time, right? But how is sexual desire not part of nature? Have you seen, been to the zoo? What the fuck? Anyway. Nature in everything demands respect, and those who violate her laws seldom violate them with impunity. The weak, enervated women who particularly catch the attention of libertines are unfit to be mothers, though they may conceive. So that the rich sensualist who has rioted among women, spreading depravity and misery, when he wishes to perpetuate his name, receives from his wife only the half-formed being that inherits both its father's and mother's weakness. Christ. Okay. Contrasting the humanity of the present age with the barbarism of antiquity. Okay. Great stress has been laid on the savage custom of exposing the children, oh God, whom their parents could not maintain. Whilst the man of sensibility, who thus, perhaps, complains by his promiscuous amours, produces a most destructive barrenness and contagious flagitiousness of manners. Not looking it up, don't care. Surely, nature never intended that women, by satisfying an appetite, should frustrate the very purpose for which it was implanted. I have before observed that men ought to maintain the women who they have seduced. This would be one means of reforming female manners, and stopping an abuse that has an equally fatal effect on population and morals. Another, no less obvious, would be to turn the attention of woman to the real virtue of chastity. For to little respect has that woman a claim on the score of modesty, though her reputation may be white as the driven snow, who smiles on the libertine whilst she spurns the victims of his lawless appetites and their own folly. Besides, she has a taint of the same folly, pure as she esteems herself, when she studiously adorns her person only to be seen by men, to excite respectful sighs, and all the idle homage of what is called innocent gallantry. Did women really respect virtue for its own sake, they would not seek for a compensation in vanity, for the self-denial which they are obliged to practice to preserve their reputation, nor would they associate with men who set reputation at defiance. The two sexes mutually corrupt and improve each other. This I believe to be an indisputable truth, extending to every virtue. Chastity, modesty, public spirit, and all the noble trains of virtues on which social virtue and happiness are built should be understood and cultivated by all mankind, or they will be cultivated to little effect. And instead of furnishing the vicious or idle with a pretext for violating some sacred duty, by terming it a sexual one, it would be wiser to shew that nature has not made any difference, for that unchaste man doubly defeats the purpose of nature by rendering women barren and destroying his own constitution, though he avoids the shame that pursues the crime in the other sex. These are the physical consequences. The moral are still more alarming, for virtue is only a nominal distinction when the duties of citizens, husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, and directors of families become merely the selfish ties of convenience. Why then do philosophers look for public spirit? Public spirit must be nurtured by private virtue. Public spirit must be nurtured by private virtue. Isn't there a book? I think I have it on my shelf over here. The Fable of the Bees. Isn't it like private vices create public virtues? Isn't that the whole point? Mandeville. Anyway. Why then do philosophers look for public spirit? Public spirit must be nurtured by private virtue. The idea is like being a hoarder, like specializing in producing something with the intent of making a profit off of your fellow person. I don't know if I agree with this, but it's essentially capitalism. Like, privately seeking to maximize your wealth actually is good for society. I've not read the book. Anyway, public spirit must be nurtured by private virtue, or it will resemble the factitious sentiment which makes women careful to preserve their reputation and mend their honor, a sentiment that often exists unsupported by virtue, unsupported by that sublime morality which makes the habitual breach of one duty a breach of the whole moral law. All right, a little bit of a weird chapter, but still good. So yeah, we'll go on to chapter 9 next, of the pernicious effects which arise from the unnatural distinctions established in society.